Now, on the day that you trip, you're going to start with a small dose, no less than half a gram, no more than 1 gram. Absolutely no more than 1 gram for the small trip. 1 gram can be quite substantial. Okay, so how do you decide whether to take a half gram or a whole gram? Base it on the microdose test you did. If you felt nothing at all with the microdose, then definitely do a whole gram. And if the microdose seems strong, take half a gram. And if you're scared, then obviously do half a gram. You're going to have plenty of time to catch up. Always err on the side of not enough with mushrooms. For me, the first trip is always a bad trip. I hate the transition from being sober to being on mushrooms. Even to this day, as an experienced user, I still don't like the transition. So the idea is, let's make it a light dose, just get the psilocybin into our system and start feeling it, and then we can move on to a bigger dose. If you're like me, you're not going to like the small trip, so it's very counterintuitive to say, hey, I really hated that experience. Oh, I have a great idea. Let's right away do it again, and this time take even more. That is craziness. But in this instance, it works for me. For me, the second trip is when the fun really begins. Me, Shroom Daddy, always enjoy the second trip. Always, no matter what the first trip was like. So you're going to wait at least 3 hours before doing the second dose. And I do mean 3 solid hours. I don't mean 2 hours and 45 minutes. No, 3. 3 hours, 3. Now, does that mean, oh, the 3 hours are up, now we have to do the bigger dose right away? No, not at all. You can wait until you've completely come down from the first trip if you want to. You can take a break between the 2 trips if you want to, although I wouldn't take a break longer than a day. This is the highest you're going to be at the 3-hour mark after ingestion. So if you're not feeling high enough, then definitely move on to the big trip right away. If you're like, oh, I'm just fine, I don't need to get higher right now, then wait, and you decide when you want to do it. You just don't do it earlier than 3 hours. But once the 3-hour mark hits, do it whenever you want to. There is one more reason for waiting 3 hours. I once did a trip where I wasn't high at all for 3 hours, and I thought, oh, I guess I'm not getting high. And then, like magic, at the 3-hour mark, suddenly I was high. I was like, wow, that was interesting. The nature of mushrooms is that they always take you by surprise. And sometimes the surprise is you don't feel anything at all. Now, if that happens, then you have to figure out, is it me? There are some people who mushrooms don't affect them no matter how much you give them. They may vomit, but they don't get high. Or is this a dud batch of shrooms? So it could be either one. You don't know at this point. Now's the big trip. Ooh, this is the moment we've been waiting for, the big trip. First of all, let me say, you don't have to do a bigger trip. If you want to do just another small dose instead of a big dose, that's perfectly fine. But I do recommend that you have a second trip, whether it's a big dose or a small dose, because the second one is always better for me. Now, if you're going to do a big dose, do no less than 2 grams and no more than 3 grams. No more than 3 grams for the big trip. If you want to do a third dose, if you have the time and the inclination and the shrooms to do a third dose, then you're going to wait 2 solid hours after you've taken your second dose before you take third dose. You should now have a sense of how much you can handle. We established your sensitivity with the microdose test. We got the psilocybin into your body with the small trip, whether you liked the small trip or not. And we got you tripping balls with the big trip. Now, you can trip as long as you want. You can keep tripping all day, all night. trip all weekend if you want to. Just remember, it's not mandatory to take bigger and bigger doses. Just do small trip after small trip after small trip. It's a wonderful way to trip. That's how I usually do it myself. But you might want a hero's dose, and that's a different story.